Okay, it is now time for public comment. Okay. Those speaking will have 2 minutes to speak today. We'll begin with Vincent Neumayer.
Good morning. It is not enough, many Utah educators say, for our students to understand Darwin's theory. These students must have a core belief in what Darwin espoused. The very notion of these educators that a student must have fundamental conviction of these theories runs flatly counter to the foundations of science itself. Science is questioning. Science is observation. Science is decided on evidence, not the special pleadings of someone's faith in alleged happenings. We can demonstrate to a student the principles of gravity. We can demonstrate the results of DNA mutations and natural selection. But none can observe the lineal parentage of man or any other creatures back through fossiliferous rock to some spark of life said to appear some 3 billion plus years ago. Several recent journal articles and presentations clearly show that many of today's educators are out for more than an understanding of science concepts. They want your child's heart and soul commitment to their theories. Several professors authored a paper regarding the teaching of evolution. In this article, they questioned, quote, "Is there a relationship between religious commitment and student acceptance of evolution?" And the results of their work, quote, "Our data show a negative relationship between overall religiosity and the acceptance of evolution," close quote. Why do you suppose this is? Could it be because, as was stated in my child's Utah textbook, that the theory of evolution is in contradiction to the literal interpretation of the Bible and that it seems to diminish human significance? The authors of the above-mentioned study state that, quote, "The challenges can be overcome with purposeful intervention, usually by cognitive dissidence for the students. At BYU, we designed a meaningful intervention that led to significant increases in acceptance of evolution." So molecules to man evolution appears not to be simply an issue of science consideration. It is an issue that requires special intervention to cajole BYU students into not just an understanding of Darwin's theory, but a core belief that evolution is just part of their natural history. So what does all this have to do with what you're going to be voting on and talking about today? The Next Generation Science Standards is put together and promoted by like-minded individuals, like-minded as these other studies. The same techniques and insistence of acceptance of Darwinian evolution and global warming is foundational in the whole of the Next Generation Science Standards. Insistence of acceptance on these pet theories removes these topics out of the realms of science education and into the space of science indoctrination. Further, this pet theory promotion is done at the expense of teaching other important science concepts in physics, chemistry, and so forth. It is founded on the same issues. As I stated in the Science Review Committee, we suggest that scientific literature, that teachers look at in scientific literatures for challenges to controversial theories. As I said this, the whole room seemed to erupt in opposition to my suggestion. Why? Are they afraid of the data? I urge you, the board, to stay true to the assurances previously made that our Board of Education will not adopt national science standards with the baggage they unquestionably will and have brought into our science classroom. Thank you.
Next, we have Heidi Matthews.
Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. I apologize. Heidi Matthews was unexpectedly detained this morning, so I'm here in her stead. A sorry substitute. But nonetheless, my name is Lisa Nentel-Bloom from Utah Education Association, and I have a few things that I would just like to talk about with you today. The first is about the topic of appreciation. The legislative session this year, I think, was a banner year for many reasons, starting, first of all, with the great collaboration. We appreciated so much the work of the board, the work of the staff of the board. They were great resources for us when we had questions. They were quick to offer suggestions and really did a great job of collaborating at the Public Ed Coalition. And we loved seeing board members at that coalition meeting as well. So we wanted to thank you for a good session, a positive one of robust and strong conversation before enacting policy. We thought it was time well spent. The second thing I would like to mention is talking about school safety. We've been so honored by the courage of our students standing up for what they believe is an important fight, and that is having safe schools, something every student should be able to accept. We're enjoying the opportunity to be part of the conversation and talking not just about gun violence, although surely that is part of it, but talking about what does it really mean for our students to be safe in their schools. And so we're looking forward to continuing that conversation. Heidi is working with Terrell and the School Safety Task Force, and that will be really important work. We're very pleased about it. And last but not least, after the school safety incidences and after this positive legislative session, I stand today on behalf of our educators wanting even more than before, and it was a very high bar before, but we stand even more wanting to work on education excellence and to making sure that our students really do have the very best opportunities. We stand with you in that journey and look forward to the conversations to lead to that. So thank you, board members.
Next, we have Richard Tolman.
Thank you. I'll try and make this quick. Dr. Dwayne Jeffrey was supposed to do this, but he's in Atlanta this morning receiving an award from the National Science Teachers Association on his efforts to improve teaching across the country. So I feel honored to take his place. I have just a couple of quick things that I think I would like the board to know about the science standards that you'll be reviewing. Ladies and gentlemen, these standards were written in the form they're now by teachers. They represent good science. Good science is driven by data, by experiments. It's not driven by public opinion polls or political science polls. Science is a self-correcting enterprise. Several here, one of us already spoken about the conflict between religion and science or evolution in particular. And then many people talk about their church doesn't accept this. If I might just mention 4 quick statements. In the October 2016 New Era, the LDS Church issued their statement, their official statement on evolution, that the church does not have a position on evolution. That's a matter for science. The Presbyterian Church has a statement on their website of no conflict with their doctrine and evolution. The Methodist Church has a similar one. 2 Catholic popes have similar statements. Pope Francis said if we try to make Genesis a literal science textbook, which he didn't think it was supposed to be, we show God as being a magician with a magic wand. And that doesn't do justice to him. And if I might just say one more thing, standards are not curriculum. These standards were written by our local teachers, and the curriculum decisions on how those standards will be met will be made by our local teachers as they teach. And you don't get better local control than those of our teachers that are some of the best in the country. And if you have time, there's a book by Francis S. Collins. He was the director of the Human Genome Project, sequencing the DNA of our race, our humans. It's called The Language of God. He used to be an atheist. Then he became an agnostic. Then he became an evangelical Christian. And his work with the Human Genome Project, seeing DNA and how it works in humans and in other animals and plants, fortifies his testimony that there is a God. It's a wonderful book. If you've got time, please read it. Thank you.
Next is Frank Strickland.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. I'm a professional scientist. I've worked in national research labs, published with peer-reviewed articles and presented at national symposiums. I have a couple of real concerns about using the next generation science standards as our primary guide in writing our new science curriculum standards for Utah. First of all, there's some really bad science in there. There's a lot of good science, but there's some stuff in there that a simple Google search by any high school student will reveal that their standards are propagating some old stereotypes that are not current with new research. And so I have real challenge with adopting them wholesale without going through a severe and major revision and look at each of those standards. Next, if we adopt the next generation science standards as our primary guide, we are basically admitting that Utah is provincial backwater enough that we can't come up with enough material on our own without going to the national to get good science. I don't think that's true. A major national research group looked and compared the next generation science standards with our current science standards and said our current ones are actually better than the next generation science standards. They're a lot more flexible. They encourage a lot more evaluation and analysis of what they're being presented, whereas the next generation science standards, because they come as a national standard, have a tendency to be inflexible and not responsive to new science that's coming up. I would be willing to talk to the committee and others about the actual science. There's obviously not enough time to get into details here, but I think that in Utah we have enough science, we have enough resources and educators that we don't have to go to the national, as it were, demigods and get their pronouncements on what is good science. We can do it ourselves. And in fact, the governor said a few years ago that we would not adopt national standards. We would come up with our own. And I think we're moving in the direction by adopting the next generation science standards as our primary vehicle for writing our new standards. Thank you.
Thank you. Boyd Tuttle.
Thank you for the opportunity to spend a minute this morning with the State School Board. We appreciate what you have to do. You have a lot of heavy responsibilities and big decisions to make when it comes to these things, because it affects so many hundreds of thousands of our young people here in the state of Utah. I'm the father of 9 children. We've lived all over the world. We've done everything from homeschool to private school to charter school to public school. So we have a pretty good handle on the different approaches. And one of the things that I am concerned about is the national standards that are being proposed for the state of Utah. I think they're inadequate. I think they're very putting us into a large basket of mediocrity, and I think that the state of Utah needs to stand above mediocrity. I think we need to be different, and we have a long history of standing out in many ways. And as a professional, I own a publishing company, and most recently we published an 822-page science book. All right, now this science book could be adopted tomorrow by any state school board in the country. It's not a creationist book. It is a science book based on evidentiary science, data-based science. In other words, the theories are essentially eschewed, and in place of theories are actual experimentation to see what the results show. In 1799, a fellow by the name of Charles Hutton in England introduced a concept of we call volcanism, or law of original horizontality, which suggested that the world was many billions of years old, and that what we see today is what has gone on for billions of years. That theory that was put forward 200 years ago was the best they could come up with at the time. So what this new science curriculum suggests is that it's time, given the technology and the tools that we have, to re-examine some of the old dogmas. So that's being taught. It's been taught for 200 years. Why? Have we really examined it to see if that's actually verifiably true? Well, yes, we have, and that's why I have an 822-page science book to show that, in fact, it doesn't stand up to the technology. And so I'm afraid that when we introduce this standard, if you will, you are disallowing the opportunity for alternative views of science, or, in fact, evidentiary-based views of science, to be explored and examined. And so I would strongly encourage you to consider, before we lock ourselves into something that is essentially mediocre and inferior, to allow that, the way science has always advanced, is to have somebody challenge the status quo. Leave that option open. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes the public comment portion of our meeting.